So, guys, welcome everyone. We are back with another session in the 7 session series, and this one is very important. I'll tell you why it is very important. So, all of us want to start clicking, be a photographer, purchase a good DSLR that would enhance the creativity part, or probably we'll be able to click good photos. But before we decide what camera we should buy, what brand we should buy, what are the features that we should consider while purchasing a camera. It is very critical to analyze it beforehand because later on, probably you might realize that, okay, this one wasn't for me. I wanted something else, or this feature is lacking. So, in this session, Ashish is going to cover the topics related to your camera purchase. What all you should consider in mind before you purchase your camera, your DSLR or any mirrorless camera. So, over to you, Ashish.
Thank you, Pankaj, for such a good brief to our session today. And hi, everyone. I welcome you. And today we will be looking at some of the aspects that we should look into before deciding what camera to purchase. And buying a camera is almost like getting married. So once you buy a camera, you are bought into the family, and it's kind of a long association, because when you buy a brand of TV or fridge, it's generally just limited to that particular appliance. When you buy a camera, it's like it never stops just at the camera, because then you have to buy the next lens, and then you have to buy the next lens, and then you have to buy other accessories. So you kind of buy into the family rather than just buying an individual product. And there is one of the major thing to understand, like a new company which gets into the camera market just because it's a good niche, it's a good popular market these days. So a company that used to make laptops and refrigerators to start making cameras, and then it's okay, they can make a very good camera, but what about the lenses, what about the other accessories, and what about the presence in the industry? So all those things matter, and we should look at some of the important aspects, and we will be looking at those aspects in detail today. And I hope you'll find this session really enjoyable, and you will get to learn a lot, and that's my goal today. So without much ado, let me start. And when Pankaj asked me to design this series of session, I thought like what else I should include, and how to buy a camera. Previously the title was which camera to buy, and then I thought like, okay, it's rather than telling which camera to buy, it should be much better if we discuss how to decide like which camera to buy, because that process, if you are acquainted with that process, then it's much easier to decide on a particular model of a camera. Because many times people come to me and ask what is the best camera, and I'll tell them that Hasselblad's H6D 100C is the best camera. It costs 25 lakh rupee, and that's just the body only, and it weighs around 2 kilos. So there's the best camera, but it has some drawbacks. It cannot shoot a very good high ISO performance, and it cannot give you very fast shutter speed. Like the burst rate, it can't give you. It gives around 3 or 2 pictures per second. So it does have some drawbacks, but as you asked, what is the best camera? So that is the best camera. The point I'm trying to make is that there's no best camera. There's no such thing as one best camera. There's just multiple different options available to do one job better than the other. So there are different kinds of camera. There are different brands and different models suitable for one form of photography over another form. So the more important question is that we should ask is, what is best for me at present? So there are 3 aspects. What is better for you, for your particular style of photography, and at the level where you are? So what kind of investment makes more sense? So with this kind of ground framework, we will proceed. And I would like to begin with asking the question, what do we expect from a camera? Like, when we have a camera, let's assume that we have a camera in our hand, what do we expect from it? So there are a few things that I have noted down, and this will form the skeleton or the framework around which the rest of session will revolve. So one of the things that we expect a camera is that it should take sharp pictures with accurate colors. This is one thing that we definitely expect from a camera.
Right.
The second thing we expect is it should have a good megapixels, like a number of megapixels should be enough. And what do I mean by enough? Because some person may require more megapixels than the other person. And we will talk a little bit more about that when we get into the genres specific to different camera requirements. But different people may have different megapixels requirement. So for somebody, 18 megapixel may be enough, while for someone else, 24 megapixel may be enough. And yet another, there may be some niche for which 50 megapixel or 60 megapixel is required. So then we definitely need to have a requirement narrowed down to a range where we know that this is the sufficient megapixels that we require from the camera. The next thing that we expect from the camera, that it should be able to focus very fast, like autofocus should be fast, precise, and it should be able to function in low light. So that is something that we definitely want from a camera in today's time. Some people like doing manual focus, which is great for landscapes and some of the very specific genres of photography. But if we look at a broader spectrum of different kinds of photography, then you definitely want to have a good autofocusing system, especially if you are looking forward to do some videos in your camera.
And also if the subject is moving.
Yeah, you will not always shoot the fixed subject, that's definitely. But I'm talking about the kind of photography that you'll do. So yes, that is there. And the next thing that you expect from your camera is that it should perform well in low light. Now, again, there needs to be a limit that you need to set, like how low you want it to perform. Are you going to be shooting in completely dark situation? If you're planning to do that, then why are you planning to do that? Is it really required for your kind of photography? Are you looking for a camera that can shoot in the evening with like decent performance, like decent ISO performance? Because you need to set a limit. Why? Because there are different cameras that are available to do crazy ISO performance, but then they compromise on some of the other aspects. So like you need to decide if you want to go that far into low light, high ISO performance. Now the next thing that we expect from a camera, and this will differ from person to person, it should be lightweight and fit into your hand. So fitting into your hand is definitely a requirement for everybody, but it should be lightweight. It can be a requirement to a particular segment that looks at a smaller body form, a smaller size factor and weight factor. So we will again go back to this when we look at the genre specific requirement. The next aspect that one must ask that are there lenses available? Like how many lenses are available for this particular camera and how much do they cost?
Yeah.
So that is a very important aspect that you need to ask.
My camera is good. I mean, I'm really happy with my camera, but the lenses are damn expensive.
Yeah, so that we realize that most of the times after we buy the camera.
Absolutely. I realized it later on.
Yeah, so it's very important to look at it before. And when I talked about the weight and size of the camera, you need to evaluate weight of the whole unit. So if you want to shoot portraits with 70 to 200 mm, you need to take into account 70 to 200 mm lens and the camera weight, and together look at the weight of the combined unit, not just the camera. And then the next aspect that is very important is battery life and the cost of a spare battery. So how many shots the camera can give you on a full charged battery, and then how much a spare battery costs. So that is something that you should look at before you're considering, or when you're considering different models. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I gave you 7 aspects that are very important to select a camera. Rest of our discussion will be around these 7 points. If you have any other consideration, other point that you can think of, please message it and we can discuss it during the question and answer session. So the first point was camera sharpness. It should be able to click sharp images with good color definition. Now the sharpness related to camera body depends on two factors. One is the AA filter, which is anti-aliasing filter, or it's also called OLPF filter, which is optical low pass filter. So what is this? This is a kind of filter that removes the moire pattern. It's something that's kind of a texture. When there's a uniform pattern that your camera gets confused and forms this weird texture. To remove that texture, there's a filter that's placed in front of your sensor. Now the drawback of this sensor is that it reduces the sharpness. Now you will be surprised to know that most of the crop sensor cameras, be it mirrorless or DSLR cameras, have this AA filter which reduces the sharpness. So sometimes if you're thinking that if I upgrade to a full frame camera, your sharpness will be better, this is the reason, because most of the crop sensor, almost all of the crop sensor cameras have this AA filter installed which reduces the sharpness. The moment you switch to some of the higher end full frame cameras, they do not have AA filter, and that is why their sharpness is better. The second factor which is responsible, and it's within the camera body, is pixel size and the number of pixels. So what you should be looking at is the pixel density and the size of the individual pixel. So one camera advertises 24 megapixel and the other camera company advertises 30 megapixels, but the sensor size is same. Say both the cameras are offering, for example, say 35 sensor. So one camera company is putting 24 megapixels in a certain area, 35 sensor. But then another company is putting 30 megapixels on the same size of sensor. So what happens? Size of the individual sensor reduces. So it's actually bad for your pictures. Yeah. So size of the individual pixel reduces, and it's actually bad for the amount of details that your sensor can capture. Resolution will increase. The number of pixels will increase. But the ability of camera to be able to record more details will decrease. So there's a sweet spot between these two factors, the number of pixels and the pixel size, the quality of the pixel. So what a conclusive statement, if you want to take out of it, a crop sensor camera with a very high pixel count is not a very good option. So try to stay away from that.
So if you have got two cameras, both same full sensor,
full frame, okay,
full frame cameras, and one is having 24 megapixel, another one, let's say, 40 megapixel. So does that mean that the 24 megapixel is better than the 40 megapixel in terms of clarity?
So this will be measured by bit depth. So there's a factor parameter, it's called bit depth, which I will compare for several cameras, the bit depth. It represents the number, or what should I call it, range of colors that your camera can capture. Or actually record. It can capture more, but there's only that much it can record and process. So the limiting factor is when it comes to recording and processing the image. Okay. And so as the pixel density increases beyond a certain limit, the ability of the camera to record a certain bit depth, its bit depth reduces, which eventually reduces the amount of tonal details that your camera can capture. So most camera companies, what they do, they try to compensate for these physical limitations with software. So the software can recover, do some of the processing to make the image look like it's from a better, it has better details, or from a better camera. But the thing is, you can understand, if the details are physically lost, there's no way to reconstruct it. The software can try or attempt to do it, but it won't succeed as well as a camera which actually captures those details and give you the ability to process those details. Now, the technical way to compare two cameras for the picture sharpness and actually the sharpness, considering combining the effect of both AA filter and the number of pixels and the pixel size, combining these factors is MTF charts.
Okay.
So MTF charts are technical charts which are available for different cameras, both by the camera manufacturers and independent agencies. Now, when you compare an MTF chart, what you need to remember is that lenses have to be same or at least a very similar construction. Okay? Because if you're comparing MTF chart from two different cameras with two very different lenses, one with 50 mm, another with 50 mm prime lens, another with maybe 1855 mm kit lens, then the results will differ very greatly, and it won't be representative of the camera sensor properties. It will be affected by the lens choices. So what you want to do, you want to compare MTF charts from two different cameras with comparable lenses mounted on it. So then you can actually see like how it really compares. MTF charts, to explain it will take another class, a separate session, so I won't get into the details. But when you look at the MTF charts, just make sure that the lines are as close to the top edge as possible. So all the lines, there will be two kinds of lines, two colors, and all the lines should be as close to the top as possible, or number one as possible. So that's what you need to be looking for. And if you want to know more how to read MTF charts, then you watch a YouTube video about how to interpret MTF charts, and that will help you. But these MTF charts are available free of cost for all the camera models with many, many different lens combinations, so you can easily access them. All right. Now, after that, the second aspect we looked at were megapixels. So we already talked about the megapixels. The numbers of the pixels may increase, but it won't necessarily mean increase in quality. It will definitely mean increase in size of the picture, the printable size of the picture. So if your requirement is to print really large size pictures, then you should look at a camera which has high megapixel count. If you do not want to print very large pictures, then 18 to 20, 25 megapixels is more than sufficient. You can crop up to half of the image and still retain a very useful amount of data and a picture which will be sufficient size to print a poster size or A2 size, A1 size, even up to A1 size. Yeah. So you can do very good printing with a 25 megapixel camera with half of the image cropped out. You can still be able to print easily A1 size or even double the A1 size. So that's something you should consider. The next thing we talked about, the next aspect to look at were focusing, the autofocusing performance. Now this is something to look at more carefully because most of the camera companies these days are focusing into developing more better and better autofocusing systems. So traditionally, here I would like to get into a little bit details. Traditionally, companies, the DSLRs would have a kind of focusing system that's called contrast detect, and there will be some small number of points, sensor focus points, which are known as phase detect. Now, just for the sake of simplicity, I would like to say that phase detect points provide a faster focusing, and the contrast detect points produce a slower focusing but more accurate focusing. Okay, so that's all. For the sake of simplicity, that's all you need to know for now. And if you want to look into depth, how these work, then you can obviously read more about it. But traditionally, the DSLRs, the cameras with a mirror assembly, they would have both contrast detect and phase detect type of autofocusing system. But the phase detect autofocusing system, which is really fast, would be present on a separate sensor, and it will have its own separate mirror, which is combined with the main mirror assembly. So what would happen as the light enters into the camera, this second mirror reflects part of that light onto the focusing sensor, which has the phase detect points, and then it tells the camera which is this is the right focus. And that's why traditional DSLRs or like some of the expensive ones are very quick to focus on a particular subject because they use a dedicated sensor for focusing. All right? With the advent of mirrorless systems, what happened is there's no mirror in front of the sensor. So what the mirrorless companies are doing, they are putting phase detect points on the main sensor itself, which reduces a lot of complications. And as you know that phase detect points are responsible for really fast focusing, the mirrorless cameras can focus really fast and consistently. On top of that, companies like Sony and Fuji also is introducing artificial intelligence into focusing. So the camera not only knows that at what distance it is focusing or just the contrast is perfect or not, it also knows what kind of object it is focusing on. So now these modern cameras are coming with face detect and eye detect kind of focusing, where focus follows an eye, a focus follows a face. These advancements are very important for a portrait photographer or a fashion photographer or even a wedding photographer. So if you are one of those guys who earn their bread and butter doing this wedding photography, portrait and fashion photography, pre-wedding, this kind of shoot, then you need to be really looking at a camera which can do eye focusing, eye tracking, and face detect and face focus, like focusing on the face. And this will be really, really coming into the picture if you are into fashion photography. That's where it counts the most, because fashion pays a lot. It's a high payment genre.
Right.
And that is one place where you continuously shoot in burst mode, and you want as many shots sharp in focus as possible because you continuously shoot and shoot and shoot. So eye detect focusing is really a game changer for fashion photographers, wedding photographers, and this kind of genres.
Okay, Ashish, we have one question. We can probably
Yes,
take
please.
this up in between.
Sure.
So for social posting pics, can I use my Sony A7S II video camera, which is 12 megapixel? So we have got this question.
Okay. 12 megapixel is the size of the camera sensor. Sure, he can post it on social media. You need to take care that each of your picture is about 1920 pixels on the longer edge. Now, why is that? Because most of the camera mobile screens, their highest resolution is 1920 pixels into some other value. Depends on the aspect size of the camera or the phone screen. So most of the social media is viewed on mobile phone screens, and most of the mobile phone screens have 1920 pixels as their longer edge. So if your 12 megapixels can produce at least 1920 pixels on the longer edge, then that's good enough to be posting on social media.
Right.
So the key is on what device people will be viewing the picture, and whatever is the maximum resolution of that device should be the maximum resolution of your picture that you're uploading to a social media website. All right, can we go to the next topic? All right. So ISO performance is the next topic in this different aspects that we looked at before buying a camera that we should consider. High ISO performance. Now, I think some of you also attended our previous sessions in which we talked about exposure triangle and how there's sometimes shooting situations where you are limited with the shutter speed choice and the aperture choice. You can't do anything about it other than changing the ISO. So high ISO performance is really important, but you should not go overboard with high ISO performance, and I'll tell you why. Let's say if you're a fashion, portrait, or wedding photographer, and even I would keep wedding photographers aside for a moment and just talk about fashion and portrait photographer. Your client will never accept an image which has grains in it.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's a directorial approach where things are in your control. The model is in your control. The surrounding is in your control. You can always add extra lights, and adding extra lights in fashion photography is really the norm. You shoot fashion with lights, not without lights. So having a very high ISO performance for a fashion photographer doesn't make any sense. If your camera performs up to 400 ISO, that's good enough for you. You don't need anything more than that. You will, as a fashion photographer, I don't see any occasion when you need to shoot or you will be shooting more than 400 ISO because your client will not accept it. And those pictures will have grains in it, so they cannot print it on a big billboards or big advertisements. So those pictures, if you shoot without lights at high ISO, then it will not be acceptable. Even if you're using the flagship cameras like D5 or some of the 1DX from Canon or some of these flagship cameras, even then, an image with more than 400 or 800 ISO will not be accepted by your client. So that's for sure. So if you're into one of those fields, then high ISO performance definitely doesn't matter to you. Many of
Guys,
the cameras...
just
Yeah.
one. So you guys can keep sending the questions. We'll be taking the questions at the end of the sessions. I see some questions coming in. So at the end of the sessions, we'll just go through it and take all the questions.
Yes, as an example, I have included some comparison of some of the cameras with the marketed ISO, that how much in their marketing material they are claiming and how much is the actual useful range. Now, size and weight of the camera is also very important. It's one of the aspects that we should look at. A small, lighter camera is really very helpful if you are into trekking, mountain climbing, into landscape photography or travel photography. If you're into any of these genres of photography where you carry your equipment to a far off location where you'll necessarily be flying on flights, or you'll be traveling long distance, you're walking on foot. So weight of the camera equipment really matters in those situations. You want to be careful with what you buy. On the other hand, if you're somebody who shoots always mounted on the tripod in your studio, or you shoot product photography, those kind of photographs, then it doesn't matter how heavy the equipment is. All you care is getting the best output that is possible out of the equipment. Also, travel photography pictures are always used on either websites or magazines, which are never printed super big size. So if you're into travel photography, then you don't need to care about too much megapixels or printing really big size of pictures. You need to just produce the best that the beauty of the place is captured, and that's all that matters in those kind of genres. One thing that you should consider, if you're left-handed or right-handed, well, most of the cameras, the controls are on the right-hand side. There was one camera that Canon came up with which has left-hand controls, but besides that, there was no other camera that has left-hand controls. But that's something that you should think about. If you're left-handed, then you should see different cameras in your hand, which has better grip or which feels better. And if you have big hands, then you want a camera with a deeper grip. Or if you have smaller hands, then you want a small camera that you can easily hold in your hand and it doesn't slip off. But it's not too heavy for your arms to carry, because you usually hold camera like this with both of your arms, and that becomes very tiring if you're doing that for long hours. So you really need to look at these aspects. Now, availability of lenses and cost is very important. Now, some camera companies have been in the market for years, for 50, 60 years. So there's a lot of lenses available, and also a lot of lenses for resale also available in the market. The used market is also big in those companies or those brands. And because those companies have been in the market for so long, there are also many third-party lenses that are available for those brands. So there's really big advantages in going with a company which is established compared to a company which is new. Now, availability of lenses is one thing, but then what exactly are you going to buy is another. Let's say there's a new camera company, but it has the lens that you're going to buy and it's within your budget, then why would you care about the availability of lenses? Let's say there are 200 lenses available on other company, but with this company you are getting for very good price, very good quality in the camera and very good price for the lens that you need, then they're available whatever you need. All that you need is available in the new camera company. So that is something you need to look at, that what is your primary genre, what do you want to shoot primarily, and what kind of lens will suffice that purpose. What is your preferred focal length that you usually shoot in, and if that lens, if that particular focal length is available in that particular brand that you are looking at. So that is something that you should look at. Not just the availability of the total lenses, because you're not going to start a museum of lenses. That's not your plan. Your plan is to get the equipment that will create pictures that you want to shoot, and that's it. Battery life and cost of spare batteries is again something very important. Now think about if a camera on one single battery shoots about 1800 shots, and the second camera shoots about 600 shots on one single battery, okay? Cost of the battery is about the same. But this camera shoots 3 times as many pictures than the second camera. To match this camera's performance or the shooting time, you'll have to buy 3 spare batteries for this camera to perform. Now usually you'll carry this camera with 1 spare battery, so 2 batteries, and that will give you about 4,000 shots. To get that kind of performance from this camera, you'll have to carry 6 batteries. And though each battery will weigh, and I don't know if you're aware or not, but most airlines have a limitation of the spare batteries that you can carry with you. So that is something that you need to consider, especially if you're into jobs, into taking jobs that require you to travel by flights from one place to another place.
Well, Ashish, I have actually carried tons of batteries at a time.
Well,
Like, I mean, I used to carry 2 cameras, one my mirrorless, 3 spare batteries for that, 2 GoPros, 3 spare batteries for each one of them, so 9. Then I had my gimbal, 3 batteries, then my drone, 3 batteries, and that Nippo additional batteries separately, all in one bag.
did they check it?
So,
Was it domestic or international?
domestic flights, yeah.
Okay. So domestic flights, they're kind of lenient, but still the rules don't allow if
But they check each and every piece of battery.
Okay.
Because they look at it like, so why are we carrying so many batteries? And this is the size of that, drone battery. So they
Okay,
check it
yes.
thoroughly. But yeah, they let me go every time.
Okay. Okay, there may be a problem. There's definitely, okay, no, there's not maybe. There will definitely be a problem for overseas travel
Probably.
with batteries. So that is for sure. Especially if you're going from a third world country into a Western country. So that part is always there. But if you're going from India to
So,
Thailand, maybe there will not be a problem.
yeah, probably. I went to Russia. I didn't carry the entire set of cameras. I just carried my mirrorless with 3 spare batteries and a GoPro. So yeah, that wasn't a problem.
It wasn't a problem. Okay. So that's good to know. The US and some of the European Union countries are very strict about that. So like, I just want to mention that that is something that you need to, if you're traveling
Absolutely,
with
yeah.
a lot of batteries, then definitely do that research, like what are the rules, are they going to allow or not?
Right, right.
Because batteries are expensive, and if at the check-in point they tell you to leave those batteries, then those are gone basically.
Good heart.
So you
Yeah.
don't want that to happen. Okay. All right, let's come to the comparison of some of the cameras that I have compiled. So there are many crop sensor cameras available, many full sensor cameras available. So what I try to do here, compare the best of the line, the flagship cameras. And you will get an idea from this Later on, you can compile your own charts like this, and I'll tell you how to do that. And this is one of the main highlight of today's session. So I will tell you the two DSLRs, Canon 5D Mark IV and Nikon D850. These are the rivals, and I'll tell you specs of them. Megapixel, Canon 5D has 30 megapixels, and each raw image weighs around 40 megabytes. Nikon D850 has 45 megapixels, and each raw image is about 92 megabytes. So there's almost double the capacity of the Canon. Now, it may not look like a big deal, but I will explain it to you why it is a big deal. To process a 92 megabyte raw image, you need at least an i7 processor. You need at least 16 gigabytes of RAM, high quality DDR4 RAM or above in the system. And you need at least GTX 4 and the above versions with 4 gigabytes of dedicated video memory graphics card to be able to process that image on a software like Photoshop or Lightroom. So you need heavy computer requirement to be able to process that image. Second requirement that it generates is storage. You will need to buy a lot of hard drives, because with digital cameras, there's no limitation of 35 frames in a film. Now, when you have 256 GB memory card in your camera, you keep shooting in burst mode. You shoot and the burst mode cameras shoot like 6 frames per second. Most of the cameras are able to shoot 6 frames per second. You end up with about 2,000 images with just 1 week of trip. If you go on 1 week trip, there's 2,000 images. If you do a wedding, there are maybe more than 2,000. So think about how many images you're shooting, how much storage requirement that will produce. So there is a cost involved with that.
Yeah, with 2,000 images, you're down with 200 GB of data. Yeah. I have somewhere close to 40,000 images with me. I am sitting on 40,000 images. God helps.
So that is an aspect that somebody needs. So, and one thing, if you shoot into RAW, you'd never want to store them in a compressed JPEG format. You would always want to store those images in RAW format. So that's for sure.
Yep.
Now, color depth is the next aspect that I talked about. Canon has a reported color depth of 24.8 bits, while Nikon D850 has a color bit depth of 26.4. So you can see, now you will say, oh, it's only 1 bit, but that makes a huge difference when it's between 24.8 and 26.4. All right?
Okay.
Yeah, so I can explain bit depth in details, but I will try to keep it simple. What bit depth means is like if you say red hue, so red hue is like red color. Hue means color. Red color in an image may have infinite possibilities of tones. Now, tones are formed by adding white or black into a color, into a pure color. So if you have red pure color, you add little bit white into it, you get a second tone. You add more white in it, you get a next tone. You add more white in it, you get next tone. And similarly, you can start adding black and you get different tones of red color. So in this way, electronically, there's infinite number of possibilities for red color to be there. Okay. Now, what bit depth means? Bit depth means ability of your storage system, your filing system, to store as many numbers of red as possible, as many varieties of red as possible, of one hue. Okay. So the difference between, and this bit depth is basically 2 to the power, so it's exponent to the number 2. Okay, so that is the resultant number. So 2 to the power 24.8 will be the capacity to store the varieties or tones of one particular hue in one camera system, and 2 to the power raised to 26.4 is the second system. So you can understand the difference. It's multiplying that many times. So
Right.
this is multiplying 26 times, so that is multiplying 24 times. So there's a huge difference that is produced. All right?
Yep.
That's why that small bit difference is quite visible when it comes to when you work with post-processing software. The difference will be visible then. But if you just look at the picture straight out of the camera, Canon algorithms affect even raw image to look like more vibrant colors.
Okay.
While Nikon images straight out of the camera kind of look dull, but they have more details in it, and you need the software to process it. While Canon, they have algorithms to process the image in camera, even the raw images, and so that the colors look more vibrant. So that is a tiny bit difference. They try to compensate for that bit depth lacking in their camera systems.
Okay.
Now the dynamic range is the next thing that is very important for landscape photographers. Canon claims to capture dynamic range of 13.6, while Nikon in their D850 claims to capture 14.8 dynamic range. Now, point to be noted, this dynamic range falls sharply as soon as you increase the ISO. So this rated dynamic range is only at ISO 100. The moment you increase the ISO, this dynamic range drops sharply. Okay, so you will be probably left with 12 exposure value EV if you drop to 400 ISO. If you drop to 1600, you'll be left maybe with 8 exposure value. So again, dynamic range EV, what it means, so it means 13 exposure value, 13 stops. So at one stop, let's say, is completely black, and you keep overexposing, keep increasing the exposure, and you keep doing it up to 13.6 values stops, and then you end up with complete white. So that means it can capture all the tonal ranges in between this. Okay? Now Canon claims to have 13.6 stops of dynamic range, while Nikon is claiming 14.8 exposure value or stops of dynamic range. So that is, again, it may seem like a small number, but it makes a huge difference when you actually look at the pictures and try to process them in post-processing.
Okay.
Now, where Nikon fails with Canon is Canon 5D claims, not claims, it's the actual ISO performance. This is their high ISO performance is 2995, which is acceptable images, that is sellable, acceptable images by the clients. It can perform up to 2995 ISO, Canon 5D Mark IV, while Nikon D850 can only perform up to 2660 ISO of acceptable images. Now you'll be surprised to know what is their marketed ISO range. They market themselves to be able to shoot at 1,02,400 ISO. So that's their marketing brochure, that's their marketing material. So people say like, whoa, this camera can shoot up to 1,02,400, 2400 ISO. So this is something that you should look at before deciding. They don't get just swayed by the marketing material. Now what is happening, some of the camera companies are marketing 20 frames per second, 15 frames per second, even 30 frames per second. So at 25 per frames per second, it's a video. It's basically a video, because videos are shot at 24 frames per second. So I don't see any situation where you would need to shoot 24 frames per second, or you will ever shoot full frame raw images at 20 frames per second or even 15 frames per second. So that, in my opinion, is a marketing gimmick. It's to attract the people to buy your camera, but it's not very useful in real life scenario, in my opinion. And I'm not denying that there cannot be a person who's shooting style or shooting requirement really needs that kind of high frame rate. So there may be people who really need that kind of speed, but I'm saying that's very small niche that would need that kind of speed. For most of us, 6 to 7 frames is more than sufficient and that is why that's the range that most of the major camera companies are at. Now weight, I will tell you, the Canon weighs 800 grams and Nikon D850 weighs 915 grams. Canon can shoot on a full battery 900 shots, one single battery 900 shots. Nikon can shoot 1840 shots on one single battery. So you can see the huge difference that they create with this, because they understand this is a requirement. This is a requirement of a major segment. They don't want to deal with carrying multiple batteries. They don't want to spend on multiple batteries. Because battery is a consumable. Battery has a life. So after, say, 10,000 shots, the battery dies. You cannot keep recharging it. Its performance decreases over time. So battery is a consumable. So over the lifetime, most cameras are rated for 2 lakh shutter flips, 2 lakhs of pictures. Over that period, think about how many batteries you'll need to buy. Because batteries are consumables, it doesn't last forever. So each battery will have rated lifetime for a certain number of shots. So Nikon is really winning the market with 1840 shots on one single battery charge, and each battery costs 4,200 rupee. And not to mention, this is the same battery that they use in D7000 series and D750 series, D810 series, even D85. So all these cameras can take in the same battery. That's really a plus point in Nikon's favor, while Canon has different kind of batteries for different models. Now, again, a lens, I have chosen a common lens to compare. 2470 f2.8 lens in Canon costs 1.3 lakh rupees, 130,000 rupee. On Nikon, the same 2470 f2.8 lens costs 1.57 lakh, so 157,000 rupee. So you can see the difference that these two companies make. Now I will tell you the specs of mirrorless, some of the mirrorless cameras, and after that I'll get to one of the crop sensor camera. So, and mind you guys, these are the best of the line. These are the best of the line cameras. These are not some random selection. These are the flagship cameras of each individual brand. I'll tell you, Sony A7R III captures 42 megapixel image. Each image is 82 megabytes. Now it is less than Nikon, but more than Canon. Color depth is 26 bits. So again, it's very close to Nikon. Nikon was 26.4, this is 26. Their dynamic range is 14.7. Compared to Nikon, they are doing very well. Nikon is 14.8, they are 14.7. ISO performance, now they lead the market in high ISO performance. Sony A7R III is the market leader in high ISO performance. As far as full frames are concerned, I'm not getting into medium format category.
Right.
Their acceptable images are up to 3,523 ISO. They can produce acceptable sellable images up to 3,523 ISO, where you can print a full-size image and it will still be acceptable. Their marketed ISO is 32,000. So here's a smart company. They know that we can produce, the acceptable limit is only 3,500. We will only market 32,000. So they're not going into crazy marketing 1 lakh ISO, which is just a marketing gimmick. This is an intelligent company. They're not misleading their consumers with the high numbers. The marketed ISO is 32,000. Their actual performance is up to 3,500 ISO. They can shoot up to 10 frames per second mechanical shutter. They have the option of electronic shutter that makes the speed much higher, but mechanical shutter up to 10 frames per second, again, they're the leader in the highest mechanical shutter. I think Nikon D5 shoots faster, but then again, that's a completely different range of cameras. I didn't include the Nikon D5 or Canon 1D series because Sony doesn't have anything to rival that. That's a different range of cameras, and Sony or Panasonic don't have cameras in that range. So I'm comparing the most common full-frame flagship of most of the companies. It weighs only 657 grams. Now, Canon weighed 800 grams, Nikon weighed 915 grams, almost a kilo, and Sony A7R III, which is a full frame just like others, weighs only 657 grams. Now comes the next thing. If you like the weight, if you're impressed by the weight, think about this. On one full charge battery, it produces only 600 shots. So
Yeah.
like, take that. On full charge battery, it gives you only 600 shots. One battery costs you 5,800 rupee, which is more expensive than the other two camera companies that we talked earlier. So one battery costs 5,800 rupee in Indian market, and one single battery produces 600 shots. So that is something you need to consider if you are inclined towards A7R III. But definitely it has positives. I haven't seen any other positive other than weight over Nikon D850. So there's no positive over D850 so far with this comparison. Rest will depend on person to person. Their 2470 f2.8 costs 1.64 lakh, 164,000 rupee. That is quite more expensive than the other two companies. Now I'll tell you about Lumix DC S1R. This is Panasonic. Lumix is Panasonic's attempt at full frame camera. They have done some pretty good job with this SR1 series. They shoot 47 megapixels, and one of their image weighs 100 MB, 100 megabyte. But not to forget, they have a pixel shift technologies in which they can shoot 8,000, like 8K pictures, 8K images, that's what they say, in which one image will weigh around 300 megabytes. So imagine the size requirement. And that kind of image you can shoot on a tripod. It's really a boon to a landscape photographer, because in landscape photography, you want as much detail as possible to capture. Now they are really smart, because what pixel shift does, it shifts the whole sensor just by 1 pixel to capture the second image. And then again 1 pixel upward to capture another image, and 1 pixel on the other side to capture another image. And in this way, they have 8 different images by shifting the whole sensor, and they combine them, superimpose those pictures to get that many pixels detailed. So you can multiply 47 by 8, and that is the megapixels that will be produced. Each of those pixels as good quality as a Nikon D850 or the Sony A7R III, because the pixel size remains the same. They're not cramming more megapixels into the same sensor. They're shifting the same sensor to click a different image and then superimposing those images into one image. So that is really smart for Panasonic. I'll really give them that. But so they really win. The color depth is on par with Nikon D850 as 26.4. Their dynamic range is 14.1, which is lesser than Nikon and Sony, but definitely higher than Canon 5D Mark IV. So their dynamic range is 14.1. Their acceptable ISO performance is at par with the Sony A7R III at 3525. Their marketed ISO is 51,200, and they can shoot at 9 frames per second. Their weight is 898 grams. Now, I don't understand this. Why is their weight 898 frames? I was confused that, wait a second, Sony is a mirrorless, about the same specs, and they just have 657 grams. Why do they weigh 898 grams? And the reason is they got rid of the mirror flipping mechanism, but they introduced the sensor moving mechanism, which adds the extra weight.
Okay.
Now, if you look at their battery shots and cost, you will be really surprised. They can produce on a full battery charge only 360 shots. So on one full battery, you will only get 360 shots. So remember I said the pixel shift is a boon if you're a landscape photographer. This is a curse if you're a landscape photographer.
Yeah.
Because don't forget, if you're shooting an astro shot, the shots are sometimes 1 hour long. your sensor is recording image for an hour, the battery will drain in 30 minutes. So in the middle
You
of the
definitely
shot,
need additional setup for that. You need to connect your camera then to a power bank and then shoot it overnight. Or
yeah, I am not sure if they have that kind of availability. But Sony has
Sony.
an option to connect a power cable, AC power, and then shoot live as long as you want. So they do, and even power bank you can use with
Yeah.
Sony. So Sony has some really good features in that area.
So we completed 1 hour, and that's why the session ended automatically.
Oh, oh, I didn't know that there's a cutoff.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess that's the automatic cutoff on Instagram. The bad part is that the previous session had some questions. People asked something, and now I cannot access that. So I'll note the questions, and probably we'll have to take the questions in next session.
Okay. Okay, the time management was not very good today.
We kind of extended it. Okay, no problem. But yeah, it's an insightful session. I guess we can take the questions next time.
I think more people are joining. Why don't we just wait?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, you don't have to use this video for further publicity and all, but at least those who joined, some of the people are joining again. So let's just
Yeah, yeah,
complete
yeah.
the session, I would say. What do you think?
So I'll take this question now. What is the shutter count life of a cropped sensor? Pixel Trap has asked this.
You want to take that question answer? You want to answer
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
question?
So let's take the questions meanwhile.
Okay.
What is the shutter count life of a cropped sensor?
Are you expecting me to answer, or are you going to answer
Yeah,
this
yeah.
question?
Yep, yep,
Oh,
yep.
okay. So there's no shutter count standard for a cropped sensor camera. I mean, it depends on manufacturer to manufacturer and what do they rate. Based on my particular experience and what sells in the resale market, I would say any camera with up to 1,50,000 shutter count is a good like in good condition. After that, the quality of pictures start to get affected, and some dead pixels start to, come into the picture. And as soon as the first dead pixel comes, the life of the camera is gone. Now,
Okay.
so there's a shutter count and there's life of the sensor. So those are two different things. Shutter is a mechanical device. It flips the mirror up, it opens the shutter, it flips the mirror back down, closes the shutter. So that mechanical device has its own life, and then the sensor has its own life. So in my experience, what I've seen that after 1,50,000 shutter, either the sensor develops a problem or the mechanism, the shutter mechanism develops a problem. So in either of those cases, your camera is not very useful. So you can send it to the repair center, they can do something, but they will not change your sensor, of course, and they will not change your mirror assembly. So if one of those things go bad, your camera is pretty much useless. And their rated shutter count is up to 2 lakh to 3 lakh, differing from companies to companies.
Okay. There is another one, I guess. EOSR versus Sony 7 III as portrait photographer. Which one you suggest?
I'm not going to suggest you any particular model. I'll only tell you the technicals that you need to look into before making your decision. Because as a portrait photographer, you need to look into the bit depth, which gives you the tonal details in the skin color. The skin tones need to be very precise and accurate. So you need to look at a camera which has a higher bit depth. Okay, and then you need to As you're specifically thinking about portraits, don't go about the high ISO because that's not relevant to you. Think of a camera where lighting system is easily available. If you want to get a Godox lighting system or a Profoto lighting system, think which camera system has a better compatibility with those, because triggers differ from system to system and some triggers perform better than the other. Or you just want a cheap system, then you can have manual flashes, you can have manual speed lights, not even TTL, and create wonderful results just with those, with an like entry-level full-frame camera. But I would definitely suggest you to focus on a camera without anti-aliasing filter. It should not have anti-aliasing AA filter, or in some companies called OLPF filter. It should have very good color depth, a bit depth, and that's all I would like to recommend you.
Ashish, you can continue with this session.
Okay. Now we talked about different full-frame cameras. We compared Canon, Nikon, Sony, and Panasonic, their flagship full-frame cameras. I wanted to just slip in Nikon D7200, a crop sensor camera, to just to see how it matches up with the full-frame variants. So Nikon D7200 is a 24 megapixel camera, and each raw image weighs around 28 megabytes. Its color depth is 24.5. So see, its color depth is at par with Canon 5D Mark IV. It's a crop sensor camera. So to 5D Mark IV was 24.8. Nikon D7200, a crop sensor camera, is 24.5. So it's very respectable. Its dynamic range is more than 5D Mark IV. 5D Mark IV's dynamic range is 13.6 and Nikon D7200 is 14.6. So here in terms of dynamic range, it's at par with all the full frame flagship cameras. So 14.6 is quite close to all this. So if you're a landscape photographer where dynamic range is really important, I think Nikon D7200 can be a much better option than buying one of these full frame cameras, because it has a low weight also, which you'll see. But it's acceptable ISO performance, because that's a limitation of crop sensors, only 1333. So only up to 1300 ISO it produces acceptable images. Its marketed ISO, you'll be surprised, is 1,02,400, just like the other full frame cameras. That's what they're marketing. So it can shoot up to 6 frames per second. It weighs 675. So 675 grams is very light compared to all other full frame cameras that we have seen. Even the mirrorless Sony A7R III is 657 grams. And this mirror assembly camera, crop sensor camera, is 675 grams. One single battery charge, it shoots 1110 shots, and your new battery costs only 3,900 to around 4,000. So that's it. And not to mention, Nikon D850 can take the same battery that Nikon D7200 takes. So same battery fits into both the cameras. Just for the information. 2470 f2.8 equivalent lens is 1680 mm f2.8. It will give you the same view field of view as the 2470 will give you, and it costs only 74,000 rupee. So you can just be shocked about all this, like the specifications that I just mentioned. And these are straight numbers. How did I get these numbers? There's a website called DxO Mark. You can go to that website, research all the camera bodies that you want to research. They also have phone camera sensors. They have mirrorless camera sensors. They have medium format camera sensors. And then they also have lens comparisons, which we will look at some of the data from their database in our next session. So I just mentioned the source so that you can access the same information that I had, and it's all available for free. The website is called DxO Mark. There's another website which I'll recommend you to do your research before selecting a camera body. It's called Pixel Peeper, pixelpeeper.com. So Pixel Peeper has images from Flickr.com which are mapped with the camera body and the lens. So you can select pictures by different users who have uploaded their pictures on Flickr.com. And on Pixel Peeper, you can select a particular camera body and a particular lens combination. It will show you all the pictures from those thousands of pictures. Why I'm saying this? Because those are the pictures taken by normal people and some maybe experienced photographers. Those are not by the photographers who have access to the best camera equipment, best post-processing, and are the most experienced in their field. Because some of the pictures that you see taken by a camera on the advertisement websites by the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, they use some of the best photographers who have access to the best knowledge, skills, and the accessories. So they can shoot much better images. With Pixel Peeper, you'll get an idea like what kind of pictures this camera is able to produce with this kind of lens that you will be considering to buy. It can be a kit lens, it can be a prime lens, it can be a zoom lens. So that research you can do on your own. Now, I think we have covered most of the things from the perspective of full frame and crop sensor. Now, Pankaj, I have some more things related to mirrorless versus DSLR and full frame versus crop sensor. And then something about genre of particular to photography. Do you think we should escape these and cover in the next session?
I think we should take it in next session along with the lenses.
Yes, because they can go very well with the lenses. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Let's take it up in next session actually.
Okay. Is there
we
any
can
question?
just take up the questions. One is, what is the way out to know actual ISO capability of any camera as it differs from published details?
So, can I answer that?
Yep.
There are several websites. There are some independent reviewers. Ken Rockwell is one of such reviewer who's independent, and he is not commissioned by any particular camera company. He does independent reviews, and you can check the practical ISO performance on his website, kenrockwell.com. Another DxO Mark also gives you the low light performance. There they mention the ISO, and that is the actual ISO performance. They also have measured values where they have graphs to show you how the camera performs over different ISO values. So on DxO Mark and Ken Rockwell, you can get this information.
Okay. Another one is, which is the leading company in mirrorless segment out of Sony, Canon, and Nikon?
If you mean, I don't know what you mean by leading company, but I am assuming you mean
market
the financials.
Financials,
like how much is their revenue. So
I guess the number of cameras sold.
Number can be higher, but revenue can be different. So I will take revenue as the indicator. So Nikon has really posted very low revenues from this last 3 quarters. December quarter was really bad, and January quarter was extremely bad, and some people were thinking that Nikon may declare bankruptcy.
I guess it is more from the perspective of features in a mirrorless segment rather than financials. I mean, if you talk about
features, then if it's about features, then I wouldn't be able to recommend you one company over the other, because like I said, if somebody really liked the 47 megapixels into 8 kind of resolution, really good quality resolution of that big an image, then that is the best camera, and it doesn't matter if they're market leader or not.
Right.
If you're more comfortable shooting with Sony a7R III, then that is, I think, that is the camera you should choose. It doesn't matter who is the market leader. And market leader keep changing from quarter to quarter as they release their financial performance. So I wouldn't recommend one particular company. Yeah. Out of all these companies, I didn't talk about Fuji Films. They are really, they have a very sweet camera, and I would definitely like to talk about it in their next session. They have some really good advantages in how their approach to designing their camera. I really like them. That like now I think yeah, we will cover that in the next session.
Okay. Um, I guess, Ashish, we have covered all the questions now. This was a pretty long session. It's
Yes,
like
it went
almost,
longer than expected.
yeah, it was way longer than expected. I mean, 1 hour, 15 minutes already. But quite insightful. The remaining part of the session will be covering tomorrow, same time, 5
Okay.
o'clock. We'll be talking about lenses, which lens to buy, what all to consider before you buy a lens, and the remaining topic of today.
Yes.
Thank you so much, guys, for joining in. Thanks, Ashish, for the insights. I guess this is going to help a lot of us buy their first camera or probably upgrading from the present camera.
Yeah, thank you, Pankaj, for this opportunity, and thank you guys for joining in. And I hope you really enjoyed the session. Please leave your feedback in my Insta profile, Lens of Eden, or you can leave a message in this video so that if there's any improvement suggestion, if anything that you particularly liked, please let me know. And thank you guys. Hope to see you tomorrow. Have a good
Thanks. Bye bye.
bye.